Trump is back in the White House. Thank God for the healing power of music, eh? This is my month in 10 records, October 2024. 10 records that have been significant for me this month. So these are a couple of records that I bought out in the real world rather than online. And had a trip to Dublin about a week or so ago. Went into a record shop there called Rage Records, which apparently has the biggest second-hand section of records in the country. Wasn't that huge, but I did find a record there that I've been after for such a long time. I very nearly bought a reissue of this recently, but wanted to hold out, even though I've been after this for years. Gypsys in the Garden album. And I paid less than 20 euros for this. So a lot less than buying a reissue. And it comes in a nice die-cut gatefold sleeve with that particularly creepy picture of a gypsy woman on the inside. This is a great record. It completes my collection of gypsy albums. I think they just released the 3 albums. I have all 3 now. This is a great bit of vaguely psychedelic, vaguely progressive, vaguely Latin influenced rock music. Very West Coasty. Fantastic stuff. Great guitar playing. Some lovely Hammond organ on here. Really tasty harmony vocals. You know, quite sort of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young kind of a feel to some of them. Check out Here in the Garden Part 1 for some of those vocal harmonies. Really great. So delighted to get that. Finally to get that. And the other one I bought out in the wild, which I'm particularly pleased about, even though I haven't played it yet, is this. The Chameleons and Strange Times. I don't know where that's showing up in the glare of the light, but I paid £3 for that in a local charity shop. In pristine condition. Like I say, I haven't played it yet. They're one of those bands that seems to have been rediscovered. People rave about them, even though I don't think they sold diddly squat back in the day. But their albums are becoming pretty expensive to pick up now. So when I saw this for £3, and this is a charity shop that normally charges a lot for its records, so I'm not quite sure, you know, who was having a bad day with the pricing gun, the sticker gun, but no complaints here. Like I say, it's in great condition. Plain black inner sleeve, which I assume is the original. Look forward to giving it a listen. I believe it's kind of post-punk kind of stuff. In fact, no, it's post-punk kind of stuff. I did have a 7-inch single, Swamp Thing, which is on here. So I know pretty much what to expect with this. But yeah, £3. Very happy to pick that one up. And of course, I've been buying stuff online as well. And one I'm particularly pleased to have picked up is this album by Amish, their one and only album, their self-titled album. I really like that kind of naive, primitive artwork, I've got to say. The kind of man in the moon, this woman reclining on this, what was that, lion, on a lion's back, and a sort of werewolf or whatever it is then. Not sure what it's got to do with Amish, but still. Sleeve notes here say that the band grew up in Ontario, Canada, close to a Amish community. And when they were looking for a name that would reflect their admiration and respect for simplicity and a natural way of life, they had to look no further than their neighbours. So that's why they're called Amish. This is a really good album as well. I mean, it starts off badly, I've got to say. First track, Sad Girl, is a pretty pedestrian rock number. I just thought, God, if it's all like this, I've made a mistake getting this. But from there on in, it's fantastic. It's came out in 1972. It's basically organ-led 70s hard rock with sort of soulful, gruff vocals. And I love it. It's really, really good. Some of the highlights, the track Wise Man has sort of a funky, extended hard rock jam feel to it. Smoking guitars, prominent Hammond organ and some really nice strong vocal harmonies. Help Me, the final track on side one, has a real Grand Funk Railroad feel to it. Loads of wah-wah guitar on that and elsewhere. I Don't Need No Body. That has a riff that's very reminiscent of Focus's Hocus Pocus, which I think came out the year before this. Perhaps a coincidence, and it's not like they're playing it throughout the whole song, it's just the opening riff, but definitely reminds me of that. They do a cover of Traffic's Dear Mr. Fantasy, which they do very nicely. And there's a track that clocks in at about 6 minutes called The Sea, which has like a harpsichord type intro and sound effects like the sea. And it's a real kind of proto-progressive rock kind of a thing, I guess. So yeah, it's that lovely period where the slight hangovers of Psych, I suppose, and you get this kind of awakening of progressive rock and hard rock all kind of mixing together, and it's produced Amish. This is a great album if you can find yourself a copy. Again, it's one that's taken me a long time to pick up, but I did find a copy for sale in the UK and I leapt on it. And talking about albums that I've been after for a long time, this has been way up near the top of my list for ages. And again, I've been just trying to find an affordable copy, and eventually I caved in. This is the one that I think I mentioned in my last video, that I was waiting for something to turn up from Canada, and this is it. Bull Angus's self-titled album. It's on the Mercury label. And there's the full gatefold for you. It is, of course, one of those horrible Unipack sleeves. But wow, what a record. Came out in 1971. They're a US band. This has a slight southern rock feel to it, but only slightly. It's not all, you know, good old boy sort of cowboy hat stuff, believe me. But there's a slight influence of that. But if you're familiar with bands like Highway Robbery, Head Over Heels, and there's a fair bit of Grand Funk Railroad in here, some Deep Purple, some Trapeze, that's the kind of sound these guys have gone for. It's full of Hammond organ, some amazing twin guitars, and even the odd bit of recorder here and there, which works really well. This album does not disappoint. I'm so pleased to finally have a copy of this. This is actually in line, I think, already for my purchase of the year. I'm not sure if anything will be capable of knocking this off that spot, but we'll see. There's still time to change, or perhaps something else I've bought and need to revisit will overtake it, but this is fantastic. Yeah, the recorder features in a track called Mother's Favourite Lover, in brackets Margaret, and that's superb. There's the vocals on it are vocals on the whole album, very kind of stadium rock, almost worthy of that kind of proto hard rock sort of sound. Other highlights: Uncle Dougie's Fun Bus Ride, which apart from having a great title, features fantastic harmony vocals and a great groove as well. Some monster twin lead guitar on here, like I say. The Hammond is very John Lord style. Brilliant, brilliant record. One of the other highlights, second track on side two, Pot of Gold, which is a joyous, funky, hard rock track with tons of organ, and again, that great guitar. And the track CY is acoustic and pretty, and probably more CSN and Y than CY, but it's fantastic. And like all the best hard rock albums, there's light and shade. This I cannot recommend highly enough. I love it. Absolutely love this record. So if you have the chance to pick it up, buy it. Great. Highest recommendation. So here's one I picked off the shelves. Great album. I bought this when it first came out. I was working in a record store at the time. I was working in a record store. Dream job for a music fan. You get to listen to records before you commit to buying them. And this one, I span it a lot and really enjoyed it. I think I bought it on CD first, in fact. And it's Salty Dogs one and only album. Although I think they've released a sort of a posthumous record of outtakes and previously unreleased stuff. But this is a great album. Came out on the Geffen Records label. It was released in 1990, so it's just at the tail end of that hair metal thing. And of course, they got lumped in with hair metal. They got a look, I guess. But this is a far more kind of bluesy hard rock thing. It's probably got more in common with bands like Cream than it does with Poison and you know, all those hair metal bands. Really enjoyable album. And unusually, it doesn't have that awful gated snare drum sound that all rock records had in the 80s and early 90s. It's got a really raw, unproduced feel to it. In fact, let's try to see who produced it. Oh, Peter Collins. Can't say I can think of who else he's produced in the past, but it is a really rough and ready live sounding record. So good. Really great album. It doesn't sound like it's of the era that it came from. They do a cover of Willie Dixon's Spoonful on here, which will give you an idea of what their overall sound is like. Come Along, great opening track. Ring My Bell, again, superb track, great drumming throughout. Really, you know, the drummer really drives this along. Such a good album. Heave Hard, She Comes Easy. I mean, the one thing about this that really sticks out is the vocalist. He doesn't have much of a range. He's got quite a whiny, strained tone, but somehow it really works. Maybe that's just in my ears, I don't know, but I love this record. I think artwork is really interesting and unusual as well. So yeah, if you see it cheap, pick it up. It's certainly one that you don't see around very often, and the prices are going up, as is common with all this kind of late 80s, early 90s hair metal in inverted commas. But really interesting band. So if you watched my last video, you'll know that I had a section called Save from the Cull, which is basically me trying to create some space on these shelves, pulling off records I haven't played for a long time, give them a spin. If they don't cut the mustard, they're gone. And this is one that I took off the shelves, and I was sure it was going to go. And I'm actually not quite sure why, because I used to really love this band, but I thought perhaps I'd kind of, just my taste had moved on. But having played it, I enjoyed this so much. Bow Wow Wow. Is the album called I Want Candy? Yes, it is. And this was the band that Malcolm McLaren put together around Annabelle. This, I think she's like 16-year-old girl that allegedly he discovered singing along to her Walkman in a laundrette, which sounds like typical Malcolm McLaren made-up bullshit. But yeah, I had a major crush on her when I was a teenager. She was probably a couple of years older than me. So yeah, she was definitely someone who was on my radar. And the music was so different to anything I was listening to at the time. You know, I was listening to Saxon and Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and all that kind of stuff. And this was something I loved but didn't shout about at the time. The musicianship is fantastic. Now, Malcolm McLaren basically stole Adam Ant's backing band. So he had to reassemble the Ants afterwards. And he put them with Annabelle and created this band. Now, I don't know whether the band play all the instruments on this album. If they do, fair play to them, because the bass playing is phenomenal on this album. Phenomenal, even. So good. Great catchy songs. Better than Adam and the Ants, to be honest, if I'm truthful. Not as poppy. There's a kind of a, well, there is a Burundi beat through a lot of it, in common with Adam and the Ants. But it's really edgy, very sexualised. I was going to say new wave. It's not even new wave. Post-punk, I guess. But a thoroughly enjoyable album. I mean, check out the tracks online. Fool's Rush In is a nice kind of more mellow track. W-O-R-K, No No, My Daddy Don't. I Want Candy is probably the best known track on here. Sexy Eiffel Towers, with lots of breathy Orgasmic Noises from Annabelle. Absolutely killer album. Can't believe I was going to get rid of it. But it's going nowhere and it's going to get a lot of play. Now I get some great comments on my videos, and one of the comments I received after the last video was perhaps I should include some cheap heat as one of the categories in this particular monthly video. Great idea, I thought. So I've dug out a record that I don't see it very often, but when I do, it is really cheap. And it shouldn't be, because it's a fantastic record. In fact, I just this weekend gave a copy of this to a good friend of mine and said, you got to check this out. It's the one and only album by Stress, who were a British band, I believe. This came out in 1991, and it is one for fans of Lenny Kravitz, that's for sure. It's got that real sound of the first Lenny Kravitz album, Let Love Rule, mixed with Led Zeppelin. And if you need one track to go away and listen to before committing to buying it, not to be much of a commitment because it's cheap, remember, listen to Red Sun, the final track on the album, which is, it's that killer combination of Lenny Kravitz and Led Zeppelin. I mean, this just disappeared without a trace, I think, when it was released. I mean, my copy's a promo. It came out on, what label was that? The Eternal label. I don't know whether that was a subsidiary of somebody else or what, but not one I've come across before. But yeah, do yourself a favour. If you see it, pick it up, because it won't cost you much. But this is an undiscovered classic in my eyes, in my ears. So hope you're enjoying it, Rob. Cheap heat. So recently I've been dipping in and out of this book, Strange Sounds, Offbeat Instruments and Sonic Experiments in Pop by Mark Brend, which is a really interesting book. It comes with a CD as well, which I've not listened to yet because I think it is just literally, synth bleeps and blurps, and it's not actual tracks by any of the bands featured in here. But I've been reading about Silver Apples and the development of Simon Cox's Simeone, which was the name of his kind of synth that he pieced together from different sort of modules. And there he is, with an early incarnation of his instrument. Apparently had no formal electronics training, and when he was putting together his synths, quite often there'd be small fires and smoke drifting out into the hall when they were trying to get the thing working. But yeah, I mean, most people I think are familiar with the Silver Apples, know the first album, but I've been listening to Contact a fair bit recently, and this is an unofficial pressing. I think it's a fairly early one. It's got like a paste down sleeve, so I imagine it's a late 70s pressing perhaps. It's on Design Records. Sounds really good. If I didn't know it was unofficial, I wouldn't know it was unofficial, because it's the sound is great. I particularly like the picture of them in the cockpit, because the cockpit doesn't look that dissimilar to the Simeone, the synth console that he's pieced together. And on the back there you can see him plucking away on a banjo, which might lead you to think, if you didn't know, that this is some kind of, bluegrass album or something. It's definitely not. It starts off with the sound of a plane taking off, which is quite appropriate, I guess. And almost immediately you get these kind of krautrock motoric beats, that lovely sort of can sort of sound, lazy sort of but hypnotic drumming. Tons of crazy synth squiggles and blurps. And yeah, you do get banjo on a couple of tracks, I think. Certainly on second track, Water, features quite heavily. But it still sounds like this crazy, psychedelic krautrock track. It's so good. The vocals on here of that kind of almost tuneless, expressionless post-punk variety, which works really well with the electronic instrumentation. Overall, I guess you would have to compare this to the United States of America album. Definitely, you know, operating in that same kind of ballpark. There's a track on side 2 called A Pox on You, which, if I had to describe it to someone, I'd say it's it sounds like someone doing the hoovering in a sawmill, which doesn't sound terribly appealing, but actually sounds really good if you're into that kind of thing. Side 1 is a track called Ruby, which somehow or other Simeon Cox gets this kind of Indian raga kind of sound out of his synth modules. Don't know how he does it, but it definitely has that kind of raga kind of feel to it. So this is a really interesting album. It's not highly rated, even amongst fans of the band. Most people kind of stick with the first album, don't give this one a lot of time, but it is well worth checking out. I've really been enjoying listening to this and enjoying reading that book. And in the news earlier this month was Jakey Lee, a one-time Ozzy Osbourne guitarist. He's been in bands like Badlands, which was a band he put together with Ray Gillan, and more recently in Red Dragon Cartel. I've shown the Badlands album before. The first Badlands album is an absolute classic. So I thought I'd show one of the albums that he played on with Ozzy Osbourne. Pretty successful album. Probably best known for the track Shot in the Dark and also The Ultimate Sin, the title track. This wasn't my favourite album at the time. Funny enough, Jakey Lee was probably my favourite Ozzy guitarist after Randy Rhoads, more so than Zakk Wylde. But the 2 albums he recorded with Ozzy weren't my favourites, Bark at the Moon and this. But they've really grown on me over the years. And there's some really good material on here. Killer of Giants is a really good track with a lovely sort of acoustic guitar intro. What's the other? Oh, Thank God for the Bomb, where Ozzy basically says, you know, if it wasn't for that we had a nuclear deterrent, we'd all be, you know, history by now. It's a really good album, this. Great listen. The band was probably the most cool looking band he ever had as well. And always liked the artwork. I mean, it's typical kind of over the top camp Ozzy Osbourne, but really nicely illustrated with the mushroom cloud and whatever going on there. So yeah, so Jakey Lee, he was shot 3 times while walking his dog in Las Vegas. Still don't know the full story. I think he was trying to come to the aid of his neighbour whose car was being stolen, and the thief basically shot him. But despite being shot, I think in the head, the foot and the chest, he survived, and looking to make a full recovery. So that's good news, but yeah, not something you want to hear about. And today's final category, ball ache. Well, what does that mean? Just that. This is something that's a complete pain in the arse for me. I've been buying a lot of records on Vinted, and it's a bit hit and miss because the people selling it don't know their arse from their elbow. But I saw a copy of Soundgarden's Super Unknown on there for a really good price. It looked absolutely mint. Looked like, I think the vendor said they'd only played it a couple of times. There were plenty of photographs of it, so I could see it was in great shape. The cover was immaculate, and I can't remember what I paid for it, but it was super cheap, hell of a lot cheaper than you could pick it up on Amazon or anything. So I got it sent to me, and of course it's the usual thing, didn't get packaged properly. So it turned up, and I don't know how much you can see the damage, but that damage was not there in the photos when they posted it online. And I tried to negotiate a bit of a discount for the fact they hadn't packaged it properly, and they said they would do that, but then they found that Vintage wouldn't allow them to do a partial refund, only a full refund, so I'd have to return the album. And unfortunately by that time I'd already listened to the record, and this pressing is magnificent. 2014 reissue, this one, I think it's 2014. Sounds amazing. And I thought, even with the damage, I got a bargain. And despite going backwards and forwards with the vendor and sort of trying to suggest solutions, they just stopped communicating after a while. And I just thought, you know what? I'm not going to cut off my nose to spite my face and send this back and get a refund. I'm going to keep it because it sounds fantastic. Once this is in a sleeve and it's tucked away in my collection, I'm going to forget all about the damage. I'm just going to enjoy the music, and it sounds sensational. And you know, any album with Black Hole Sun, Spoonman, The Day I Tried to Live, like Suicide, Fell on Black Days. I mean, this is almost like a Soundgarden greatest hits by one of the greatest vocalists of all time. So it's a ball ache, but it kind of turned out all right in the end. But so there you go. That's my month in 10 records. Hope you saw something you enjoyed. Do leave a comment below. Like and subscribe and all that stuff if you haven't done already. And keep living the dream, American or otherwise. Bye for now.